Abortion is typically seen as a woman's issue, but what about the men? Do words like guilt, responsibility, and love apply to the guys too? That's what's next on the abortion controversy. Thank you for joining us for part 8 of a 13-part series called The Abortion Controversy. We have been dealing with the ups and downs and ins and outs of the abortion dilemma, and I've been interviewing 2 women. We've been hearing from a woman's perspective, Dianne Wagner and Antionette of Mafgia Ministry. They've dedicated their lives to helping to shed light into this dark subject. And today we're going to shift gears and talk about the men. Men, it obviously takes 2 to produce a baby, and we are involved. And so guys, get ready. We're going to hear from the women and what they have to say to us. So ladies, again, thank you for being here. This has been a very enlightening series of programs. I've learned a lot, and I have a lot more to learn. So I'm going to brace myself, because I know you're talking about the guys, and so where do you want to start?
You know, when we think of the issue of abortion, it's really remarkable the number of people who either claim or just believe that abortion is simply a woman's issue, that abortion only affects women, or that women are the only people grappling with this issue. That idea is simply false. We know that statistically, over 1/3 to 1/2 of all women will have had an abortion by the time she reaches age 45.
Wow, that's an incredible
statistic. It's staggering, and it applies to women who are in and out of the church. If we say, for the sake of argument, that there are the same number of men and women in the world, and we know that over 1/3 to 1/2 of all women will have had an abortion by the time she's 45. That means over 1/2 to 1/3 of all men will have fathered a child who was aborted.
And I'm assuming in a lot of those cases, I guess we don't really know, but that a lot of those men don't even know that they fathered a child.
Perhaps not, very likely not. But what we do know is that abortion is not just a woman's issue.
In fact, what I wanted to share, I did some research on that and how men respond to the news of their girlfriend or even wife, you know, who's pregnant with an unintended pregnancy. And these are what I came up with. You know, they can both agree to the decision of an abortion. The man and woman, they both decide together. Or the man may pressure the woman. He doesn't want the responsibility, so he will threaten her, manipulate her into an abortion, threaten her with, you know, leaving. Abandoning
So a lot
her.
of times the woman doesn't want it, but the man puts the screws down.
Unfortunately,
and says, you do this or else.
That's right. Then, or maybe it's a friend or a parent who's putting pressure on that young lady, and the man in this case just stands aside and let other people make the decision for his baby. You know, another one is well, when the man may abandon the relationship altogether. He just disappears. He gets the news, he leaves, so he's not even in the decision process. He leaves the picture. The man may remain in the relationship, but passively leaves the decision to her. There's another one, which his partner may choose abortion against his wishes. And I've seen this. I've had men come to me and share their experience where they wanted the baby, but their wife chose, or their girlfriend chose, you know, to have the abortion. And then the last one was the man may not even know about the abortion, like you were just saying. It's until it's already passed, if ever. You know.
So those are responses of men.
Typical responses of men.
I'm sure we're going to get into the issue of how should men respond. I mean, obviously, the ideal, in an ideal world, is for a man to wait until he gets married and for a woman to wait until she gets married, and then they don't have to deal with this issue, at least most of the time. But we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a crazy, mixed up world. I've thought a lot about this whole issue, and it seems like a lot of it's just like the Middle East. The Middle East mess between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Nobody can seem to figure this out or unravel this or bring about peace. And as long as we live in a sinful world where people are doing what they're doing, this dilemma is going to come up, right? I mean, I guess until the Lord comes and gets rid of sin, we're going to be dealing with this until the end of time.
Right. In fact, earlier you were asking us, giving us a scenario. Do you want to go into that now? Or?
Sure. I was telling you about, I had a real practical question. If I were to backtrack back to my teenage years, I didn't grow up a Christian. Grew up in the Hollywood Hills, went to North Hollywood High School. At the age of 19, I had never read the Bible. I'd never prayed. I didn't know anything about God at all. And I think there's a lot of people like me, a lot of guys like me, a lot of girls like me back then. And I was just living, I went to the parties, went to the rock concerts, I smoked marijuana, snorted cocaine, and I lived a very promiscuous life that I'm ashamed of right now. And now that I'm a Christian, thank God, the Lord has changed my life. I did, by His grace, wait until I got married with Kristen, and we have 2 beautiful children, and it's just a whole new world for me. But thinking about the men's responsibility going back when I was 19, what should I have done as a man if one of the ladies that I met at a party, or that I knew as a high school friend, came to me and said, "Steve, brace yourself, I'm expecting a baby and you're the dad." What should I have done? We're talking about the man's issue. I wasn't ready to get married, wasn't ready to be a dad. I didn't know anything about getting married or being a dad. But give me the options and tell me what, to make it practical.
Sure.
What should someone like me have done in that situation?
Well, the idea of taking responsibility for something has really become lost in our culture. I don't think that we would say that just because a couple gets pregnant, they're meant to get married. There are tremendous options, adoption being an incredible one, where if a couple does get pregnant and it is unplanned, that there's a way for that couple to move on with their lives. And the giving your child up for adoption is a difficult decision. It's a difficult process in terms of having to release that child to someone else. But it helps to preserve the life of everyone who's involved. There was a quote I heard recently that said, "We live in a society where it's okay for men to walk away." And that's so poignant, it's so true, but such a tragedy, because we've created a culture, or at least accepted one, where it's okay for men to engage in life-changing behaviors. And yet when it comes time to take responsibility, to be a man of integrity, to act with character, to say, "I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to walk by your side. I'm going to be with you through this circumstance." Instead, we've put the onus, you could say, of responsibility on women, where men can throw money at a problem and say, "Go take care of it."
You deal with it.
He can just simply abandon her and say, "This is your body, your choice, so you make the decision."
Okay, so if I wasn't ready to get married, I should still let the woman know that I don't want you to abort the baby. This is our baby. This is a life, and I'm going to support you, and check out an adoption option. And then if the child was born and then found a home, then I'm assuming, as I look back, that I should still be in the situation, in the picture, so that the boy or the girl knows that I'm the dad, I'm daddy, even though I made a mistake, I didn't marry your mom, but I'm your father. Is that the way I should be, or should I just bow out and just let another couple raise a child not knowing about me? What's the right thing to do?
And even another couple, depending on the agreement and the adoption scenario,
Yes.
Because there's different adoption scenarios where the biological mother and father are able to have some degree of contact with that child. And then there are situations where there's no contact. So that would depend as far as the fathers. But if there's an open door for involvement, yes, sir, that father needs to be in there.
Absolutely.
And so many times we see a young lady having the baby and with the support of her mother and father, you know, but where's the father?
Yes.
And the sad thing about this is that child grows up without ever being acknowledged by its biological father.
Yes.
You know, your mother and I chose not to get married, but that doesn't mean that you aren't
Valuable.
precious and valuable.
Right. And we talked about that too, that I know you told me you really want to stress that if a man and a woman do come together outside of marriage, even if it's just a one-night stand or whatever, and the woman gets pregnant, and then they choose not to abort the baby, and the baby grows up, the baby, and he or she knows that Dad is not with me now, at least it needs to be communicated clearly to that child that the mistake was in what Mom and Dad did, but the mistake is not you. You're not a mistake, right?
Yes.
You're
Absolutely.
not to blame. You are still precious and valuable in the sight of God. You have a purpose. And to
Yes.
me, that's just, the lights really went on when you told me that's really important.
Yes, and it's sad because of, you know, we engage in certain behaviors and there are consequences. We know that if we have sex, particularly with someone we're not married to, sex can lead to pregnancy. And yet when someone winds up pregnant, the child is seen as a punishment or a horrible consequence of that behavior. That child came by the hand of the Lord. If the Lord is our creator, and as believers we really do believe that, then the child came by the hand of the Lord. And so instead of treating, and you know, one of the first seminars I ever gave, a woman in the audience really was strong on this point, that the sex outside of the bounds that the Lord had established, that was the sin. The child was not the sin. The pregnancy was not.
And you know, and this whole topic sure re-emphasizes to me, and I'm sure to you, that following God's plan, as described in the Bible, as outlined in the Garden of Eden, for a man to leave his father and mother, be united to his wife, not his girlfriend or his boyfriend, but his wife, and the two of them become one flesh. And it's in that context that sexuality takes place, in the context of commitment, and in that context, children are born into the world where they can grow up. And I know that's just not what happens so often in this world of sin, but it's still God's plan. And when we follow God's plan, the result is blessing.
You know, so many times we hear I'm not ready for this. I'm not
Yes.
ready for a child.
Yes.
And we need to take on the mindset of, I'm not ready for sex
Yes.
because I'm not ready to take on what could be a result. You know, we're so quick to say, I'm not ready for this baby, but yet we're so quick to say, I want the sex.
Right.
I'm ready for that.
And you know,
And-
it's understandable too, to some extent. I mean, when you look at the sexuality that just saturates our society, that people just do it. They just do it. Like, if it feels good, do it. And they don't think about the consequences of producing a life. So the convenient thing to do is just to get rid of the baby, when that's really not God's plan at all.
Well, and it's incredible, Dianne, I appreciate something you mentioned earlier, the number of women who would actually keep the baby if the father said, I won't leave you. The scenarios that she laid out, men saying, I will leave you, men threatening to actually harm the woman if she keeps the baby, men just completely abandoning her. There are so many children who would be alive walking the earth, and so many women who wouldn't be post-abortive if men said, I made a choice, I'm going to be a man of integrity, and I'm going to support you, I'm going to pay child support, we're going to walk through this thing together. It's amazing the number of women who said, I would have kept my baby, but he wouldn't stand by me. What was I going to do? I had nowhere to go. I had no support. She doesn't want to tell her parents. She's in crisis. And that man in that situation, even if he is a 15-year-old, saying, you know what? I'm not going to leave you. Now, obviously, the younger you are, the more you have parental involvement. But considering the majority of abortions take place between 18 and 24, you're talking about students, that demographic, they're in college, they're single, and what you're dealing with is men who are saying, it's your body, your choice. And we've really given them kind of a get out of jail free card, because they get to put their arms back and say, this is just a woman's issue. I don't even have a voice here.
Wow.
And walk away.
Well, and it sounds like it's not just the man's issue and the woman's issue, it's the parents' issue too. I mean, if a girl would have come to me and told me that she was pregnant because of me, my parents need to be involved as their son, and we all need to network together and say, okay, I made a mistake, I did wrong, but I need to own up to this, and at least if we're not ready to get married, we're ready to act responsibly and to be a part of this woman's life and this baby's life and do the best we can.
And that all goes back to acknowledging the value of this son.
Yes.
Okay, he's living a very irresponsible life, but he's still created in the image of God.
That's right. And my dad should have said, or it never came up, or my mother, this is a grandchild.
And that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Now, okay, so I think you've answered my question concerning me as a promiscuous 19-year-old, godless, just doing whatever I wanted to do. Now, what about in your husband or your fiance's situation? Your situation, as you told, you've discovered that you were expecting at 25. You were not married yet. You still had 6 months until the wedding day. Go into what should a Christian man do if he finds out the situation? How should he relate?
Well, certainly
to this
a Christian
unexpected
right,
development.
Exactly. Well, what should a Christian man do? Well, hopefully that Christian man, not just believes in God, but believes God.
Right.
By believing God, you have that experience. God is there. So when you say Christian man, hopefully that man will appreciate the value of life. So it won't even be an option as far as the abortion.
That's right.
That it's like, we have a baby, Now, you had asked about my husband. I have no doubt his love for me. And many men fall under this where they leave it up to the woman. They support her. David flew to Reno. He paid for the abortion. He went to the clinic with me, went with me afterwards back to my apartment where I was living. And he supported me the very best way he knew. And we've talked about it a number of times, and we've been through the crisis, and the Lord has restored our relationship.
Amen.
But one thing that had a big impact on him was that it was legal. It was legal. It wasn't like we were doing anything wrong.
From the government's perspective,
right,
constitutionally.
But now, of course, he has had his regrets, and he's gone to the Lord. He's gone to the feet of Jesus with that. And being a man, I don't know if we need to go into it yet as far as the grief and the experiences of the men, but men have, when they do come to the point where they realize what they did was wrong.
Like you came to that conclusion.
Right. Men come to the same thing, and it impacts man in a different way because it's God-given. A man is to be the head of the household, the house band, the protector, the provider. And so everything that is innately in him, he went against. So the guilt that a man experiences, especially when men are the ones who want to go in there and fix it and make everything right, just take care of things. So when a man comes back and he realizes he wasn't there for his wife or his loved one.
And that was his baby too.
And that was his baby, so he wasn't there for that baby. Men can have a terrible reaction to that. And as much as women stuff it, men stuff it deeper. And a lot of times, they will fall into alcoholism. It's very common.
They'll have post-abortive
They have their own post-abortive
symptoms as well.
Exactly. And with the men whose wives have chosen to have an abortion, even against their will, those men, it's really sad because their voice has been taken away from them. So they deal with anger and helplessness. They've lost their voice and they've lost all control over saving the life of that child. And my heart really goes out to those men because they've been stripped of their the protector, the provider. Everything has been taken away from them.
Yes.
So, in fact, I was telling Antionette this morning how it was in 1976 that the Supreme Court decided that a husband had no legal right to limit his wife's decision to abort. He has no voice. So it's not just what the wife does to him, it's society. They have stripped him of his manhood.
Right. So we can't just say that just because the government has made it legal in 1973 that the government is infallible and that every decision and every
certainly.
law that it passes is necessarily right.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
the government is made up of people that are sinners like the rest of us, and only God is infallible and His word, and we need to follow His plan.
Yes.
So what does a man do when he struggles with the anger, struggles with the guilt?
He grieves.
He grieves?
Absolutely grieves.
Does
In
he go
fact,
through a grieving
he does.
process? How does he get out of it?
Well, one thing that I see happening, and I'm really thrilled to see this, there are more and more sites for men to go to. And when men are with other men that have gone through it, just like when in any kind of group setting, when you're with other people who've experienced the same trauma, it's making an impact. And these men are able to pull this up out of the deep, and they realize their similar experiences.
Yes.
And they're able to share their pain. In fact, I wanted to read you this letter I got from a gentleman.
Please do.
I won't read the whole letter, but I highlighted parts that I wanted you to hear. Because he said, I have wept, I have prayed, and thankfully I have decided to take some level of action for me personally. I will be dedicating my baby. And he was referring to God. He knows that I have wept often.
Now, is this the baby that's been aborted?
This is a man who is post-abortive, right. He knows that I have wept often, referring to God, and afresh after reading your story and reflecting on mine. And I have repented of my sin. Nothing I can do will bring back that child. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I do feel like there are men in the viewing audience who wrestle with this. Both of us have had experiences, and one gentleman came up to me, he didn't know my story, and he said, my grown daughters won't talk to me, and I believe it's because I had an abortion when I was in college. Just out of the blue, how that resurfaces, that unresolved issue.
Well, this just re-emphasizes the last program where we talked about the church. The church is supposed to be a voice in the wilderness. It's supposed to have a voice, and this is such a big issue in society, and it's so deep buried in people's hearts that it just doesn't make sense from God's perspective that the church just ignore the issue and put it in the closet. That we need to be talking about the issue. We need to be able to reach out to people. We need to have resources. We need to have ministries. We need to have discussions and answers so that women who are struggling and men who are struggling will have somewhere to go to resolve and to bring healing to some of the deepest wounds. I mean, I can't think of, my children are more important to me than life itself and to my wife. And if I would have had, or if Kristen would have had an abortion, I mean, the trauma would be deep in me and in her, and we would need help. And what better place to go than to the church? That God's plan is that it tells the truth in a loving way and is able to minister to people like Jesus did. And Jesus wants to help everybody with whatever sin, whatever crisis anybody's going through.
That's
Just
right.
makes perfect sense to me.
I appreciate that you raised the point of the church, because this idea that it's not just a woman's issue or that it is just a woman's issue really does exist in the church across the board, across denominations. And what I hope the place we will come to is that the responsibility and culpability for the act of abortion, it lies at the sin of both men and women. Men, they don't get to just walk away. They don't. The responsibility for what she had to go through, walking through that abortion alone, the spiritual repercussions that she's suffering, that lies at the feet of both men and women. There are numbers upon numbers of men who have stood aside while girlfriends, wives, sisters, daughters had to go through that experience alone. And the message of value, the message of redemption, the message of life, forgiveness. It needs to be heard by both men and women. Right. And you think about men being leaders in the home and in the church. Our men bear such a heightened responsibility as our leaders in the home, leaders in the family, and the leaders of the church, that to be a voice on this issue, that their voices would be louder than even women's voices in saying, we've been divinely ordained to protect, to defend, and we're going to take up that calling boldly, in love, right, but seek to defend the weakest and most vulnerable among us.
I got it. The lights are on, and as you're talking, it sounds to me it's not just a woman's issue, it's not just a men's issue, it's a church issue as well. That
yes.
The church, just like you said, there's sin with the women and the men, but it sounds to me that there can be sin with the church in not dealing with the issue and in not reaching out a helping hand to those who need God and His love in this crisis. Well, we're out of time. I'm going to wind up with a Bible verse, especially to the men. And this is in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 11. The Bible says, "But you, O man of God, flee from these things concerning immorality and pursue righteousness." Do what's right, whatever situation you're in. And godliness. Live a godly life according to God's plan. You'll save yourself years of heartache. And faith and love. God's love, Jesus' love. We're supposed to be the channels for Jesus. What would Jesus do in these situations? And patience and gentleness. We need to come close to those that are hurting. We need to be men. We need to take a stand. We need to do what's right so God can bless us and use us as His hands and as His heart in a world that is just falling apart because of sin. Men, may God help us.
Dianne Wagner and Antionette Duck share powerful, life-changing information in this 13-part series, The Abortion Controversy. To order this 6.5-hour DVD set for only $34.95, call 1-800-782-4253. That's 1-800-782-4253. Or you can write to White Horse Media, P.O. Box 1139, Newport, Washington 99156, or order online at whitehorsemedia.com.